Good morning, everyone. Just want to deal with a couple of housekeeping items before we actually get to our seminar. So we are doing a special emphasis this weekend on marriage. Actually, I didn't plan that this would fall on Valentine's Day. Melissa actually brought it to my attention yesterday. It's like, wow, what a great timing. And I said, I didn't really plan it, but it is good timing. It's a nice time to be thinking about relationships. Our 3-part series is entitled The Crazy Cycle. If you're tuning in online, in the description section of the YouTube video that you're watching right now, there is a link where you can just click and access the PDF material of the workbook for this seminar this weekend. Now, if you came last night, you received a printed one. And if you weren't here last night, but you come this afternoon, you'll also get a printed one. But we're not passing out the printed ones right now because you really don't need it to listen to our interaction this morning. And while you're watching the video, you don't want to be distracted with the printed material anyways. But please feel free to access that. This marriage conference is presented by Dr. Emerson Eggerichs, who is a man that is passionate about helping people, helping couples in their marriages, and helping men and women understand better the needs of the opposite sex. Just to clarify, this is not just for married couples. This is for everyone. We all need help in terms of how to relate to other people, including people of the opposite sex. So these are principles that I believe equip us to have healthier relationships. So just keep that in mind. This is not just for married couples. The principles apply across the board. It's entitled The Crazy Cycle. That's this 3-part series. That's what it covers. And so my lovely wife, Melissa's up here with me, and I'm so thankful that she is willing to join me for this. We've been on a journey together for 13 years in marriage, and she and I have been blessed by the material that we're going to be sharing with you this morning. So before we hear Dr. Eggerichs as he talks about her needs, unconditional love, his needs, unconditional respect, that's the title of our presentation this morning, I'd like to do a little bit of a review, a recap of what we covered last night. Very simple. This is The Crazy Cycle. That's the title of the 3-part series. And it's based on Ephesians chapter 5 and verse 33, where Paul is writing to husbands and wives, and he gives 2 very distinct commands. To husbands, he says, let each one of you love his wife as himself. And then he says to the wife, and let the wife see that she respect her husband. And when this doesn't happen, something takes place in the marriage, which is described by Dr. Eggerichs as the crazy cycle. What is the crazy cycle? Without love, she reacts without respect. And without respect, he reacts without love. When her needs are not being met, there is a negative reaction. And when his needs are not being met, there is another negative reaction, and we begin to spin on this cycle. Now, I want to remind you, and especially those of you that were here last night tuning in, we do have a comments section of our YouTube channel, and some of you did interact with us. I want to encourage you to do that. We had a couple of really good questions that came in towards the end. We didn't cover it last night, so we're going to just ask this question on behalf of someone who typed in the chat last night, and then we're going to try to unpack it for just a moment, and then we'll listen to Dr. Eggerichs as he talks about her needs and his needs. So here's the question. I'm going to turn it over to Melissa here. What is respect? We're talking about love and respect, and we use these words. Sometimes we just assume people know what we're talking about. So unpack the word respect.
Yeah, I think that when we look at just going to the word love first really quick, we understand love is to feel cherished and desired. But that word respect can actually have various definitions, and it's important we understand in what context we're using it for this seminar. And We were talking about this last night, and we were looking in the dictionary, and there's two main definitions that come up. One is a due regard for the feelings of others. And I think that's the kind of respect that everyone wants and desires, right? You want someone to be considerate for your feelings and how you are.
Husbands should respect their wives too, in other words.
With that definition, well, with both definitions, but that is one definition. But there's a different definition for respect, which applies a little more to what we're dealing with today, and that is a feeling of deep admiration for someone or something elicited by their abilities, qualities, or achievements. And basically, what we're trying to say is that, and we're generalizing this. This is not like because you're a man, this is always this way. But generally, men, they need to feel like you respect their ability, their capabilities. That's why when we look at an example, for example, of a marriage book, when a wife brings home a marriage book, she's saying, I love you so much that we can only make this better. I love you so much that, we're going to talk more about love and how to cherish each other and how to take care of each other. But what the man often thinks is, when you bring home a marriage book, you're saying, my performance has not been the best, hence you're trying to improve my performance.
I feel inadequate as a husband when I see that marriage book.
Right. Yeah. And so it's in this way that we talk about love and respect. It happens in many things. Sometimes if I've been really stressed and I've just, I get that boiling over point where I'm just unburdening my stress on him, and let's say I cry, well, he has told me so many times, when you cry, it makes me feel like I'm not a good enough husband. If I was a good enough husband, you wouldn't be crying, okay? And yet, my cry might have nothing to do with him as a husband, and yet it's this feeling of inadequacy that he feels, because a lot of, men generally more have a need to feel adequate and feel like they're capable of doing it.
Competence.
Yeah.
We're all vulnerable, right? I mean, we often talk about the woman's vulnerability, but men are vulnerable too. We just are vulnerable in a different way, and Dr. Eggerichs unpacks this in the video we're about to watch. Men are vulnerable in feeling inadequate. When we feel like we're not doing a good job, whether it be as a husband at home or as a father or at work, there is a sense of vulnerability, and we respond differently. I kind of withdraw, I become silent, I go into my cave, so to speak. But it's important for us to remember that men are vulnerable too, but we're vulnerable in a very different way than women.
Yeah.
Again, we're generalizing. The shoe doesn't always fit, so, it just so happens that in our case, it has really fit well, this whole concept.
It has. And it's not that women don't want to feel capable, right? As a mother, let's say you want to feel like you're a good mother. And that's true. We all want to feel like we are able to do things well. But I think men have a stronger feeling, whereas women generally derive more vulnerability from the quality of their relationships.
Absolutely. So with that in mind, let's watch this video and hear from Dr. Eggerichs himself.
We're looking at the crazy cycle. Without love, she reacts without respect. Without respect, he reacts without love, and this baby spins. And we want to focus in this segment on a husband's love. And actually, we're going to look at two aspects of this. In our first segment, we're going to look at the unintentional things we do as husbands that feels unloving, and it ends up putting us on the crazy cycle. The other segment, we're going to look at those moments where we do kind of intend to be unloving. We get nasty. I wrote the book Love and Respect, but there are moments when I don't want to apply it. I don't want to be loving at this moment, and we're going to unpack that as well. It is something that all of us experience because we look at the world through pink and blue, through male and female. And Jesus said in Matthew 19, have you not read? He who made them from the beginning made them male and female. Not wrong, just different. But what about these unintentional moments where we react in a way toward our wives that causes them to feel unloved? Let's focus in on January 5th. She's just gotten off the scale in the bathroom and she put on 10 pounds and she comes to you and she says, I can't believe it. I can't believe I feel fat, I feel ugly, I have nothing to wear. We had all those Thanksgiving meals. all the Christmas parties, all the New Year's celebrations. I can't believe I put in at 10 pounds. I feel horrible. Well, you empathize, you're a good man, you listen. And ironically, coincidentally, the next day you're at the Christian bookstore and the lead book is Dieting for Today's Christian Woman. Yeah, we all make that mistake once, right? But you purchase it, you come home, and you give it to her, and for a brief moment, she goes ballistic. And as she's going up through the roof, she screams through a pink megaphone into your blue hearing aids, "You may have two brains, one's lost and the other's out looking for it." She calls you a brainless idiot. And you're in disbelief, and you want to say, "See if I ever buy you a diet book again," So what's going on here? She's feeling unloved. Here's the message she thinks you're sending through your blue megaphone into her pink hearing aids. "I do not accept you. I do not approve of you. I do not love who you are unless you look like a Dallas Cowboy cheerleader." That's what she hears. But we're tempted at that moment to dismiss her as childish. Why? Because when they've done research on body image issues, women have a tremendous vulnerability with body image issues, whereas men less so. So it's so easy for us to pass judgment on her vulnerability because we don't have that as an issue. We want to say, "Grow up, woman. Good grief. Quit being so childish. Quit react." And we pass judgment on a vulnerability that she has, that God has allowed her to have. And we can say all day long that she ought not to hear that message. But she has a vulnerability where you and I don't. The research on body image issues is off the chart challenge to females. A woman can be a perfect 10. She can be a model out of New York, and they've done studies where she's looking at herself in a floor-length mirror and she'll still see all of her flaws, move into self-deprecation, and pass judgment on herself. She doesn't like what she sees. A husband, he can have a 40-pound spread on the front, 40-pound spread on the back. He's still eating like he did when he was a football player, and he's looking at himself in a floor-length mirror, and what's he see? Atlas. He doesn't have a self-image problem. Now, think bell curve. There are some men who do, some women who don't. But bell curve, the research on this is in. So here's the deal. Your heart's in the right place, but you end up on the crazy cycle, right? You're trying to help her, trying to do the loving thing, only to be told that you're unloving and you don't feel respected in the process. And you could take up offense. And then you react in a way that's even more unloving. And let me share with you that all of us are insecure. Without love, defensively, she reacts offensively without respect. It's unintentional. You're an honorable man trying to do the loving thing, only to be told you're unloving and feel disrespected in the process. And at that point in time, the question on the table is this: are you going to explode and keep feeding that crazy cycle? Or subscribe to this idea. When your wife reacts in those ways, when she deflates in those ways, you're stepping on her air hose. She has this love tank connected by an air hose, and you're stepping on it, and she deflates. So here's what I want to challenge you with. I know your heart's in the right place, but you're a mature, honorable man, and you can stop this crazy cycle. At those moments where you start spinning on it, and you're in disbelief because your heart's in the right place, here's what I want you to do. Say, "Honey, I'm sorry. That was unintentional. Will you forgive me for having done something that feels very unloving?" And then go quiet and just leave it there. My prediction is you'll see her spirit soften and she'll receive that. Just simply at those moments where you did something unintentional, rather than taking up offense and spinning on the crazy cycle, you have power. You have power. Do what I'm asking you to do. "Honey, I'm sorry. Will you forgive me?" Go quiet. Watch what happens.
We got married young and just out of college. I kind of had an expectation that now that we're married, we'll get to spend all this extra time together, and he'll come home at a certain time, and then as soon as he comes home, we'll just spend the whole rest of the evening together. And I think throughout the early years of our marriage, realizing that wasn't necessarily the case. He'd come home late, and I felt kind of like he'd rather be at work than home with me, and so I felt unloved. I kind of viewed that as him, why doesn't he want to come home to me? Why doesn't he love me enough to come home earlier? Because of that feeling of not being loved, or not thinking that he loved me enough to come home, I would kind of turn around and be disrespectful to him in just the way I talked, or honestly really nagging him a lot about, "Where were you? Why didn't you go get your bag sooner? Why didn't you call me first?"
Felt like I'm busting my chops at work, and I come home, and if I know I'm going to be late, I'm probably dreading walking in the door because I know what's going to happen. I know I'm going to get barraged with questions on what am I doing, why am I late, and that can also be frustrating to me, especially depending on how many times you hear that over and over and over again.
If I'm feeling hurt, I just spit it all out there.
When I feel attacked, my natural reaction is to attack back, but I know that saying those things out loud won't make it better. So my tendency then is to clam up and not say anything.
He even had to walk away because he was being attacked so much. But him walking away makes me feel like he doesn't love me enough to like resolve this, so I don't want to show him any respect or love either.
And this is still an issue that we're still dealing with in our marriage, but one way that we get out of the cycle where she says something and I say something and then we're spiraling is to realize that whatever my fault is in this situation and apologize for it. That seems to diffuse both sides.
When Michael apologizes to me first, it makes me feel very loved, like he understands me, like he knows that whatever he did that hurt me, he wants to fix it. In that regard, it allows me to also see, oh yeah, I did this, and I want to apologize to him too, because I didn't want to hurt him.
Learning what the real issue is, that it's not that I didn't come home, or it's not necessarily that I came home late one day, but that she's feeling like she's not desired anymore, makes me want to change, to let her know that she's desirable and that I want to come home and spend that time with her, so she knows that.
Breaking the crazy cycle, I try to remind myself, like, Michael's a good person. He's not against me, he's for me. And knowing that regardless of who's at fault, that I'm supposed to love and respect him because that's what Jesus told me to do.
We're looking at the crazy cycle. Without love, she reacts without respect. Without respect, he reacts without love. And we're looking at two aspects of a husband's love at this point. That's our focus. And last time we looked at the fact that we do things unintentionally. We're not intending to be unloving, and yet we get ourselves in the crazy cycle when we hand her a diet book. and then we're told we're unloving, and we feel like she has no respect for us, and we get in that crazy cycle. And our hearts are in the right place. But now we're going to look at the fact that there are moments when we intend to be unloving. What do I mean by that? There are moments when we get miffed, we're annoyed, we're irritated, we're mad, we're angry, and we don't want to be loving. In fact, we want to be unloving to teach her a lesson about being more respectful. And I've tried that with Sarah many times over the years, and it goes over like a Led Zeppelin. It does not fly, baby. But let me illustrate how this happens. Suppose the two of you are on budget. You've tried to get your finances in order, and you've been doing pretty well on that, and you're checking the checkbook, and suddenly you realize she spent $500 beyond budget. And you come on court. I can't believe this. Now, what are you feeling at that moment in time? Well, you're very upset over the fact that she has misspent. You're irritated, to say the least. So you come at her, and what do? What'd you do with that $500? Money doesn't grow on trees. You know, you just spin. I thought we agreed. We agreed not to do that. I can't believe this is unbelievable. You're unbelievable. Okay. A lot of people think, you know, if we didn't have these money problems, he might say, if we didn't have these money problems, we'd have a great marriage. No, it was your unloving demeanor and attitude toward her spirit that caused her to deflate and spin you and put you into that crazy cycle moment. And then we fixate, if we didn't have the money problems, we'd have a great marriage. No, as we pointed out earlier, it's the lack of love, it's the lack of respect, it's that sense of hostility, it's a sense of contempt toward the spirit of the other person that deflates and provokes them, that keeps you spinning and causes the relationship eventually to fail. Technically, if we didn't have money problems, things would be easier. I get that, but that's not going to cause your relationship to go under. And here's another deal. When you, and this is what we do as men, when we intend to be unloving, I don't want to be loving right now. Why? Because I'm going to teach her a lesson. What lesson? I'm going to teach her to be more respectful of me and more respectful of budgeting. Oh, so how's that going to work? Let me share something with you. Your end goal is worthy. It's worthy to honor the budgeting, to honor your leadership. I get that. But you cannot use unholy means to achieve a worthy end. You cannot be unloving to motivate her to be respectful. See, the key to motivating another person is meeting that person's deepest need, especially during conflict. And isn't it odd that you would actually deprive her of her deepest need in order to motivate her to meet your deepest need? So the question on the table becomes this: at those moments where we're irritated, where we're annoyed, where we're angry, where we're in disbelief, when we're feeling dishonored, I will tell you that our default mechanism is to react in a way that feels unloving to our wives, and that's why God commands me in Ephesians 5:33 to put on love. Why? Because I don't do it naturally. The command is moot if I do it naturally. Why would God command me to do something I do naturally? It is very natural for me to be unloving when I feel disrespected. It is not natural for me to be loving when I feel disrespected. So I have to go into these moments prepared, whoa. And furthermore, if I say to myself, I'm going to teach her a lesson by being unloving, I'm going to teach her to respect me, it won't work. She'll only close off and pull away from you. So my appeal to you is this: you're a man of honor, seeking to do the honorable thing, but you will never be able to achieve those objectives by coming across in a way that feels unloving to her. You cannot use unholy means to achieve a very worthy end.
That's a powerful point. The key to motivate my spouse is to meet their deepest need. And sometimes we do the very opposite. We try to motivate them by depriving them of their deepest needs. So I told you guys last night, I withdraw. That's my default reaction. And I withdraw because I don't want to be nagged at. And let me just clarify, I use that in parentheses. Melissa doesn't nag. She complains about my behavior, and she is 99% justified in those complaints. My interpretation is nagging. And so when I feel like I'm being nagged at, that's my perception, I feel inadequate, I feel thus disrespected, I withdraw. And that's the cycle, because by withdrawing, I'm depriving her of her greatest need, which is to feel loved, because if I withdraw, I am depriving her. Because for her, the loving thing to do is let's sit down, let's talk about this, let's solve this, let's resolve this. My withdrawal is my way of protecting myself and protecting us, because I want to avoid conflict at all costs. That's just the way we operate. And so this is such a powerful point, isn't it? The key to motivate the other person is to meet their deepest need, not to deprive them. Now, I've had to learn over the years, I've never bought a diet book, but I am very solution-oriented. So, Melissa will come to me and share something, and I want to give a solution. And what are you really after sometimes when you're opening up and talking about how you're feeling?
Just a listening ear.
Yeah. It took me at least 10 years to figure that out, but it's actually the loving thing to do, isn't it? But it's not just sit there and, passively listen. It's really empathize. And for me, I just feel like, hey, let's solve this problem. Let me give you the tools to figure this out, and let's fix it. And that can come across, as you saw, unintendedly, as an unloving thing. So it's important for us to remember and differentiate between intended hurt and unintended hurt. And Melissa, we have worked with some couples. There was a young lady that we worked with in Montana who was in a relationship where there really wasn't a whole lot of goodwill, a lot of abuse. And he was depriving her of love, but in a way, not necessarily the way we're talking about here. So how would you say a woman should respond in that situation?
Well, I think that there's 2 points that were brought up here. There's intentional hurt and unintentional hurt. But we're going on the basis that you're married to a goodwill person.
The whole thing is based on that, isn't it?
It is. It's based on you both really want what's best for each other, but we don't always know how to give what's best to each other, right? But we really want to see our spouse happy and to be happy in the relationship. Now, they're not super common, but there are cases that I've seen where, some people have a spouse that unfortunately, is not good-willed, is malicious.
Mean-spirited.
Mean-spirited. And I think that's a different category to be dealt with separately.
It's important to
But-
clarify that.
Yeah, but going back to just the average couple, where they really want to be happier, you have that first example where sometimes you unintentionally do something that the other person sees as unloving or disrespectful.
Like the diet book.
Like the diet book, where you didn't want to hurt them, and then they get hurt, and then they react in a way that hurts you in return. And really it comes down to our pride, right? Our pride kind of springs up, and we want to fight back. Like, I didn't mean to hurt you. How can you accuse me of hurting you? And then you can become, have entered that crazy cycle. And so it's okay to say, I'm to be sorry that you didn't intend to hurt. So, I really didn't intend for that message to come across. I'm sorry. We have to take responsibilities for the way things are perceived, not just the way we thought they would be perceived.
So, men, just real quick, my experience has been with Melissa, with my sister, with my mother, a lot of women in my life that I've interacted with. Women respond best when their deepest needs are met. And for me, one of the things I've had to learn, and marriage has taught me this, and I even preached about it recently, learning to make a good apology. And that's another topic for another time, but Emerson lightly touched on it. But when you mess up, don't justify, don't offer excuses, be specific when you apologize, and learning to make a good apology, because a good-willed woman, again, we're assuming here we're married to a good-willed person, a good-willed woman will always respond positively to a good apology. I mean, that's just been my experience with my mother, my sisters, my lovely wife.
Coworkers,
Yeah. So anyways, now we're going to go to his needs, unconditional respect. And this is something that also needs a little bit of unpacking. So let me get this up here for you. His needs, unconditional respect.
The crazy cycle says without love, she reacts without respect he reacts without love. We're looking in this session on a wife's respect. And of course, many wives say, I don't even know what this looks like, Emerson. And this is one of the real challenges, because women, have good hearts, but they don't understand, I think I love him, shouldn't he feel respected? So we want to kind of unpack what this looks like, particularly because there are what we call gestures of contempt that women innocently display. They don't intend. The University of Washington said when a woman is upset, her eyes darken, face turns sour, hand on the hip, scolding finger, the sigh, the rolling of the eyes, the head goes back. And when estrogen kicks in, the word choice of contempt is incredible. Women will fight with words. And in a man's world, all of these are, as I said, gestures of contempt. So he begins to feel that you're using this topic as an opportunity to send him a message that you don't like who he is as a human being. You don't respect who he is. And we can say he ought not to feel that way, but what we're pointing out is that he has a vulnerability in an area that perhaps you think he shouldn't have. And I want to think about an episode like this. Let's suppose you go to that Christian bookstore and the lead book is The Language of Love and Respect. This is the third book you decide to buy in marriage in the last 12 months for the two of you to read. You got the Love and Respect book, then you did the Love and Respect workbook. Now you got the Language of Love and Respect. And you come home and you start reading, wow, that's us. And then you're done with this and you think, he needs to read this. He needs to read this. We need to read this together. We need to really get into this. But he's been busy, he doesn't have time to read it from cover to cover. Now, I'm going to highlight in yellow some of the key sections for him, to read. So then you set it on the stand next to the recliner he reclines in when he's watching Sports Center. He comes in and, this is the third marriage book in the last 12 months. First two marriage books we read, we got in huge fights. If I say anything about the marriage, I get in trouble. I'm just not going to say anything. And he's, I just don't know why they don't publish these in yellow. Good grief, look at all that she's underlined. But he shuts down. He just stonewalls. Why? Because there is a vulnerability, thinking bell curve, in many men here. He thinks the message you're sending to him in this third marriage book is this, through your pink megaphone into his blue hearing aids, and that message is this: I don't accept you, I don't approve of you, and I don't respect who you are, Buster, unless you change and become more loving like me. And you can say all day long, he ought not to hear that message. But he has a vulnerability here. And we have to work with that vulnerability. There is this feeling that when he is in the situation, you're going to be pulling out of him things deep in his soul that basically are going to be communicating to him that he's inadequate. And even though that's not your motive, in the culture of intimacy, in the culture of love, the consensus is in women do relationships better than men, generally speaking. And what happens in these situations is the man is feeling this. This is really about you feeling that I'm not adequate, that I'm not, who I'm supposed to be. And so the goal here is to change me, because you find me unacceptable. You don't approve of me. You don't respect me. In the same way, when he gave you that diet book, you felt like he was saying, I don't accept you, I don't approve of you, and I don't love who you are. And even though there's a difference between the diet book and the third marriage book, I'm trying to make the point that there's a vulnerability at different moments on different topics, and if we don't get in tune with that, we're going to see the spirit of that person deflate, they're going to pull back, going to stonewall, and you're going to come at him even more. So the question on the table is this: is it okay for him to have a vulnerability in this area where you don't? And what's fascinating is if he brought home a third marriage book to you, you would be energized. So what we have to do again is be reminded. Jesus said, have you not read, he who made them from the beginning made them male and female. Not wrong, just different. And your husband has a vulnerability where you don't. And it would be so easy to pass judgment on him as childish. It'd be so easy to say, I value the marriage, you don't value the marriage. I want to deal with my stuff, but you don't want to deal with your stuff. And in the process, you can be motivated to do the loving thing, even the honorable thing. But he's feeling like it's very disrespectful and that you're ultimately saying to him, he doesn't have 1 ounce of love in his soul toward you in the marriage. So what's the remedy? One of the things during these moments is you need to speak the words what I call respect are. Say to your husband, help me here. I'm not trying to send you a message of disrespect. I'm not trying to dishonor you. I have a need for your strength. I have a need to connect with you. How do I say this in such a way that you don't feel I'm secretly sending you a message that I'm trying to shame you and dish you? I need something from you. How do I communicate this in a way that you don't think that I'm trying to put you down? Ask that question and then say, can you forgive me for having come across in a way that felt disrespectful to you? And then go quiet and watch what happens.
I've been married to my wife for the last 15 years. I usually work about 60 to 65 hours.
His job is high intensity, high stress. I felt like I was not loved. I felt like I was neglected because I literally for the longest felt like we were two individual beings trying to live together, like coexisting pretty much.
And I'm thinking, hey, I'm sacrificing for taking care of the family. But eventually I would hear her say, how is your second wife doing?
I used to ask, how is your work wife, taking care of you? And of course that made him mad.
And I would be like, what do you mean second wife? She would be like, well, you're always working and you do not have time for us, me or the kids. I thought that was kind of degrading because for me, having a second wife is like, man, that's like committing adultery. So it turned into an argument and I would counter back to say, you know what? I work all this time. What do you think I'm doing this for? My mom, being, very strong personality, will try to intrude into my family area.
I felt like she did not respect me as his wife, and she started stepping into the role of still caring for him, even though the Bible says leave and cleave. He gave more weight to what she had to say instead of what I was saying.
From Susan's point of view, I was trying to choose my mom or her needs more than my wife and my kids need.
When he would ask for things, I'm like, well, you know, you're your mama's boy, so why don't you go to your mama and ask for it? And what I did in turn was not respectful at all.
When she said that I'm not man enough to deal with the situation, it kind of made me mad because I'm thinking that's disrespectful.
I was coming to a point of being very tired of constant fights. Like, we will be good for weeks and then all of a sudden we'll go back into the crazy cycle.
She said, you know, I don't want to live like this, and I used the word divorce. When I used that word, it kind of shook me up to say, you know what, for me to use that word means something is terribly wrong between me and her.
We need to change the story, and that's when we ended up taking the class, Love and Respect.
I saw the change in her. Her body language was different. I saw her starting to respect me, and the tone changed. To know that she values what I'm doing makes me feel like, wow, you know, man, I can fight the world, but my wife is here with me and she understands what I'm doing.
I would go up to his office and just give him a hug or just say hi, and he would apologize to me, which would never happen before.
Just enjoying each other's company, allowing her and giving her that time made her feel that she is loved and respected.
Without love, she reacts without respect. Without respect, he reacts without love, and this crazy cycle spins. And we're focused here on a wife's respect. And we looked last time at these unintentional moments where you end up coming across in a way that feels disrespectful to him, and your heart's in the right place, and yet you still spin on the crazy cycle. But what about those moments where, you know, if we were honest, we actually intend to be disrespectful? You know, many women will say, Emerson, you know, I have no idea what respect is. I don't even know what it looks like. And I say, no, I understand that. Do you know what disrespect is? Oh yeah, I got that down. But he should know I don't mean it. And as we pointed out, the University of Washington said that there are these gestures of contempt that women display when they're upset. Eyes darken, face turns sour, hand on the hip, scolding finger, sigh, rolling the eyes, head goes back. And when estrogen kicks in, that word choice of disrespect is just zeroed in on his spirit. And you're trying to awaken him to your deeper need, but he doesn't hear the cry of your heart. He only thinks you're using this as another moment to send him a message that you find him inadequate as a human being and that you don't respect who he is as a human being. And we can say you ought not to feel that way, but we're pointing out that men are vulnerable. And let me say, men serve and die for honor. This isn't a narcissistic thing. We actually give our very lives for honor. The disconnect between what women feel about respect and what men feel about respect is the difference between night and day. So you need to trust me here. Men soften and serve and respond when you communicate respect toward their spirit. So what happens at those moments where you're nasty, you're upset? Suppose he's been on the road for a week. He comes home and he, later in the evening, makes a request to be sexually intimate. I mean, after all, he has a need that only you can meet. But you're not feeling well, you've got 3 children under 8, and it's been a busy day, and so you say no to him. But he kind of comes back and is kind of making a stronger request, and you're kind of thinking, that feels very unloving to me. And then you say, you know, is that all you ever think about is sex? I mean, is that all you ever think about? I mean, what, is there something wrong with you? I mean, come on. And whatever it is you might say, could go down that way, it might go down just much more subtle, but the message is there's something wrong with him making that request. And so how does a man typically respond to that? He feels like you don't respect him. You don't respect his need, you don't respect him, that there's something inherently wrong with him because he's not like you. And this is why Proverbs tells women not to shame their husbands. Do not shame them. It's inadvertent, but he can begin to feel that he is not like you. That's the challenge. He is not like you. So at those moments, what does a wife do? I want to challenge you with this. You cannot use unholy means to achieve a worthy end. I know you're trying to help him be more loving and more understanding, but you cannot send the message of disrespect to motivate him to be more loving. In other words, as we said to the husband in another segment, you cannot deprive your husband of his deepest need to motivate him to meet your deepest need. You can't deprive him of his need to feel respected for who he is apart from his performance. You don't have to show contempt and disdain toward his spirit because maybe his request for sexual intimacy is not timed well. You don't have to show something toward his spirit. You may say, what you've done doesn't feel loving to me, and I'm finding it hard to respond, but you don't have to turn your guns toward his spirit and say, I don't respect who you are for making that request, you animal. See, that's where we cross the line in the same way that a husband, it's one thing not to love what she's done, but it's another thing to, no one could love you, woman. I mean, these are over the line, way beyond what's necessary. And why do we do that? We think that we'll motivate them to respond to our need. As we pointed out, the key to motivating another person is meeting that person's deepest need. Your husband has a need to feel respected for who he is, even at those moments where he may be making a request that feels unloving. You can say to him, I don't want to say this disrespectfully, and I know you have a need, and I hope you'll be patient with me. Help me communicate something here in such a way that you don't feel like I'm trying to dishonor you. And watch what happens when you do that. His spirit will soften. He's not going to like the fact that you said no, but you're not going to see his spirit deflate, and I do not predict you'll get on the crazy cycle. But when you react to him in this disrespectful way because you're thinking he's unloving, you're only going to spin on the crazy cycle. Without love, she reacts without respect. Without respect, he reacts without love. And some couples go 2 days, 3 days, a week, just pulled back from each other, and they think they've made a mistake in marrying this other person. Not at all. What you have here is an honest misunderstanding among people of goodwill. So here's what I want you to do. Never use an unworthy means to achieve a very worthy end. Don't deprive him of respect to motivate him to meet your need for love. And if you've stepped over the line, rebound by saying, will you forgive me for having said that disrespectfully? Don't say unlovingly. He doesn't see you as unloving. He sees you very loving, but he doesn't think you like him or respect him. So say, will you forgive me for having been disrespectful? And go quiet and watch what happens.
Disrespecting a husband, embarrassing him in public, or shaming him because of his faults will not motivate him to change his behavior. We've seen it many times where, we're with other couples and, she's sending indirect messages. She wants to, she wants him to be a better husband, and she'll critique his performance as a husband or maybe his competency at work in a joking way, and he takes it well and kind of laughs along with everybody else. But you kind of just see the spirit of that man deflate. As women respond best when her needs are met, love, men respond best when wives communicate respect, independent of his performance. So we're talking about unconditional respect, and that in our culture today actually sounds somewhat offensive to some. But Melissa, when we talk about unconditional respect, we're not meaning unconditional agreement, are we?
Right. It's not saying that whatever your husband says you have to do. This is talking about if you don't agree on something, you're going to treat him nicely, not tell him in a mean way. I love the story in the Bible of Abigail as she dealt with King David before he was king and he was coming to kill her husband Nabal. Mm-hmm. She could have come up to him and say, what do you think? Are you out of your mind? You're going to come here and kill? You're supposed to be representing the Lord. You're being so, ungodly. And that would not have helped David to receive the message. She came very humbly. And she said, I know you don't want to do what's bad. I know you want to do what's best. I know your desire is to serve God. And you're going to look back and you're going to say, thank God for helping me not kill, to shed innocent blood. Abigail spoke respect, and she helped him to see that his course was wrong in a way that he could receive.
She still rebuked him.
She still told him that what he was doing was wrong.
But it was the way she did it. So last night we talked about me leaving the cups on the counter, and that irritates, right? Yeah. And rightly so. Now that I've
But I think when you look at an example like that, what's irritating is not so much me telling you not to put the cup, but me saying, don't you care?
Right.
And you're saying, no, I do care. I'm not putting the cups there because I don't care. And so that
I'm not thinking.
Yeah.
But nagging doesn't motivate me.
Right.
Right? Now, talking about it at the right time and in the right tone does. And so we've been able to work through some of those little annoyances, because these aren't like big issues, in our marriage, but the little issues can become big issues if we don't talk about it. But it's talking about it at the right time and in the right context.
Yeah.
And
Without
all of a sudden
provoking.
we make progress.
Yeah.
And I don't feel like I'm being attacked.
Right.
And so just excellent material here. We talk about unconditional love, unconditional respect. And, there's a lot of good information, but the truth is, without the Spirit of God working on both husband and wife, this really is impossible, because we're talking here about my response to you is my responsibility, whether what you did was right or wrong. In other words, regardless of your performance as my spouse, my response is my responsibility. And so I know we're just a little bit over time. We're going to end our session with a 5-minute video that illustrates this concluding point. My response is my responsibility. And just remember, this applies to your work. This applies to your school. Whatever context where you interact with people, remember this. My response is my responsibility. There is no justification, no matter how bad the other person is or how bad they've been, for you responding in a way that is disrespectful or unloving.
Do you know what I love? I love it because it kind of comes out of my selfish nature, but I love to blame Sarah. I love to blame her for my unloving negative reactions. For instance, suppose she forgets to lock the door and turn on the security system in the evening after I asked her to do that, right? I mean, I love then to blame her for the fact that I get angry, that my voice raises, that I'm unloving. After all, I wouldn't be unloving and I wouldn't be negative had she done what I asked, right? So I blame her. But I made a discovery. I'm going to let you in on the secret that I discovered. Are you ready for this? It doesn't work with Sarah. She doesn't buy it. Oh, I can technically confront her for having neglected to do what I asked. I mean, after all, I asked her to lock the door, and I asked her to turn on the system, right? And the hope is that this thing will come on and everything will be okay. And I can actually get upset with her that she didn't do that. But that's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is the fact that I blame her for my unloving and negative reaction. But Sarah doesn't buy it because she knows this, that my response is my responsibility. My response is my responsibility. Sarah's bought into that idea for herself. I bought in it for myself. Now, neither one of us like that little phrase, my response is my responsibility. But I want to more fully explain to you the power of this expression. My response is my responsibility. In fact, I want you to listen in and observe what I had to say about this in our conference. Coming to a point where you say, my response is my responsibility. My response is my responsibility. And what I mean by that is coming to a point where even though Sarah may be 80% guilty, or at least I think, I own up to my 20% and I just focus on my 20% of what I'm doing wrong, and I just stay right there. I stop right there. I don't get into blame placing. I don't start saying, well, I am this way because you made me this way. Where does this go? You and I both know that doesn't go anywhere. So the mature one comes to a point where he or she says, my response is my responsibility, and I've got to come to a point where I make a decision that I've got to just stop blaming, even though that person technically is to blame. But it's not going to go anywhere, because if they're really immature, they're not going to receive that. And in fact, my response is my responsibility. Sarah doesn't cause me to be the way I am, she reveals the way I am. Let me illustrate this. A speck of sand in the human eye first causes irritation, then infection, and if not cared for, eventually loss of vision. That same little speck of sand in an oyster first causes irritation, then concretion, and produces what? A pearl. Now, did the sand cause the results in the human eye? Did the sand cause the results in the oyster? No. The sand is an irritant. If that's not the case, next time you get sand in your eye, be careful. A pearl may pop out. See, we all say how stupid that is. The sand is an irritant. It isn't the cause. It reveals the inner properties. But let's put it this way.
Oh, look at this. We have a rose here. And I step on this rose. Oh, that rose aroma. Ascending to my nostrils. It's so wonderful. Now, did I cause the rose to smell like a rose when I stepped on and put pressure? No, the pressure I put on the rose revealed the inner properties of the rose. Well, look what's over here, a skunk. Got it. Oh, there's an aroma. Did I cause the skunk to smell like a skunk when I put pressure on it? No. That revealed the inner properties of the skunk. Who are you in marriage, the rose or the skunk? The mature person comes to a point where they own up to these ideas and say, oh God, through Jesus Christ, this is true. I'm going to be the mature one. I'm going to do what is right, whatever my spouse does to me. I'm just going to do this because ultimately it's not about them. It's about you and me.
Well, it's true. My response is my responsibility, and Sarah does not cause me to be the way I am. She reveals the way I am. Now, if you're like me, don't you just hate that? I mean, everything within me, as I said, loves to blame her. I want to somehow make Sarah responsible for my responses. But the discovery that I made that has so much power, and here's my experience. When I finally locked into the idea that my response is my responsibility, and it was tough at those times, it's still there, and I'm not perfect, and don't hold me to this because I'm going to blow it tomorrow. But I had to lock into the idea that my response is my responsibility, and at first I thought I was losing power. I thought, she isn't going to deal with her stuff, I'm the one that's dealing with my stuff, I'm taking all the blame, etc., etc. I went through all of that stuff in my mind. But here's what I realized. When I locked into that and began to own up to what I'd done wrong and apologize for my unloving negative reactions or began to pull back from blaming Sarah, something interesting began to happen. Sarah began to respond to me far more positively. Here's the question to you. Do you really believe that if you were to subscribe to what I just said, that your response is your responsibility, that your spouse will begin over time to respond to you more positively? You see, in the odd sense of this, we actually hold our spouse responsible for our responses so that they will come to us and apologize and say, I'm so sorry for making you to be the way you are. And that then they'll become very positive and excited. I mean, that's frankly just stupid. It never works that way. So every year we make New Year's resolutions. We say, you know what, I need to make a decision to do something. Can I encourage you to make a decision to write on a piece of paper, my response is my responsibility, and maybe put it in your billfold and say, this year I'm going to commit myself to doing this with the hope and the prayer that it actually will positively impact my spouse. Not to suggest clear up my own conscience, because I guilt trip myself as a result of blaming Sarah when I know deep within my soul I'm wrong. Adam only knew two beings, and after he sinned, the first sin that he committed? He only knew two beings, God and the woman, and he said, the woman you gave me made me to eat. He blamed both beings in one sentence. Talk about the economy of words. But there's guilt with that. And once I locked into the idea that my response is my responsibility and began to work on that, my conscience was cleared. Sarah began to respond more positively, and my relationship with the Lord vastly improved. You and I have to decide this year whether we're going to be a rose or a skunk. That choice is really yours. You can either reveal that you're a skunk, not a pleasant thought, or you can reveal to the people around you and to yourself that you're maturing, and to God Himself that you're a sweet, sweet rose, and the aroma is a sweet savor.
We've come to the end of our session today. Thank you for your attention and for sticking with us till the end. So we ended on that note. My response is my responsibility. And really that is the key to breaking the crazy cycle. Our last session will be at 3 p.m. this afternoon, where we're going to unpack this a little more. It's entitled Breaking the Crazy Cycle, which is taking responsibility for my own reactions. Somebody's got to be the mature one. Somebody's got to take the high road and say, okay, regardless of how they're behaving, I'm going to do what's right and what God commands is. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 33, unconditionally love men and women, unconditionally respect. And again, only by the grace of God, only the power of God. And Dave, I was almost forgetting. Yeah, please. Thank you, Drew. I was looking over there to see how my children were doing, and thankfully I saw your hand pointing to Dave. And then we will pray. So I was wondering if Dave was going to be able to come up with a poem, but he did. You're good. We motivate our spouse when we can meet their deepest need. With love that's unconditional, respect that's guaranteed. Your heart may be exactly where your heart just ought to be, and yet you may end up and need a big apology. A diet book may hurt our pride. It's not a loving touch. You might appreciate his grin, his talents not so much. We don't intend to show contempt, relationships made whole, so watch for where they're vulnerable and motivate their soul. The things our spouse reveals in us, are we a skunk or rose? So start to pay attention. Do you smell good to their nose? I can't be blaming others for the choices that I take. It's my responsibility for the response I make. I think that was the best one you've done so far, Dave. That was amazing. Praise the Lord. Thank you. I will invite you now to pray, and Melissa, why don't you lead us in that prayer?
Kind Heavenly Father, your patience and your love never ceases to amaze us, and your desire to see us happy and fulfilled when we learn to love like you do. And so we ask for your Spirit's help that not only in our marriage, but in all our relationships, we will learn to look to Christ, take responsibility for our actions, and be filled with your sweet, sweet Spirit. These things we ask for in the name of Jesus who died to save us. Amen.
Amen. Our afternoon session will be live streamed, by the way, 3 p.m. If you're not able to come back, I know it's cold. Please join us there on our YouTube channel, 3 p.m. God bless you. You're dismissed.